Hello, my name is Jason Long, and today I'm going to be taking you through the Hiring for Success process, which is based very heavily on the book Who by Geoff Smart and Randy Street. And this is the process that I've used at many different businesses to hire the right people time and time and time again. And I think it's really important to get started thinking about the cost of hiring the wrong person. In a small business, the cost of hiring the wrong person can be ten to $50,000, depending. And in a big business, it can be 100,000 to 500,000, depending. And so hiring the right people the first time is critically important. There are so many mishires in business because people don't understand the right process to go through. This process works. So let's go take a look and see if we can walk you through it. First off, the goal is not to find people to hire, it's to hire A players. It's to hire the people that will push the business forward. And this is the process for doing that. This is the A method for hiring, which is from the book Who, like I said. And it's a step-by-step process for hiring top performers. The steps in this process are the scorecard, setting up the scorecard, sourcing, selecting the people, and then selling them on the position. And selling them on the position is really important because the top people that you want to bring in, they're getting a lot of offers from a lot of different people. So you need to work to sell them on the position. Let's take a look. All right. As I mentioned before, finding the right people is the single biggest problem in business today. Those mishires can not only cripple the business, but they can be extremely costly, especially when businesses are just getting started. That core team you first bring on, that makes all the difference in the world. But if you're putting together a new project or a new initiative or whatever, hiring the right people makes a massive, massive difference. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably already know that. So you start off with a scorecard. The scorecard helps you clarify the role and expectations. The scorecard defines the mission, outlines the key outcomes, which is critically important because how many times have you gotten 6 months or a year into hiring someone and said, they're just not doing what I thought they were going to do. They're just not at that level that I want them to be. They're just not accomplishing the thing. But did you outline that to begin with? Do you know what that thing is when you hire them? And if you go through and you put that together initially, it's tremendously easier 6 months down the road to say, oh yeah, they're doing the thing or they're not doing the thing. So that's why outlining those key objectives are really important, or those key outcomes are really important. And then you have to identify the competencies and attributes required for success in the role, because you can hire somebody that accomplishes one or two of these pieces, but it totally misses a few of the other things. And a lot of times you've got something where the person can get the job done, but they're not a good culture fit, or vice versa. And very often, actually, what we see is good culture fits, but they can't actually do the job. And so that can cause all sorts of issues within the business. So let's take a look at what that scorecard looks like and how to put it together. So, and by the way, these are the different pieces: the mission, the outcomes, the competencies, and in order to assure alignment and communication. This is what that scorecard looks like. The scorecard works by setting up the title of the role, in this case, the sales director at this company, the candidate's name, so you'd have the person over here, their mission, which in this case, as a sales director, their mission is to double revenues from business clients in 3 years by securing new accounts and growing existing accounts. The outcomes, so grow revenues from 25 million to 50 million by the end of year 3, which is a 25% annual growth. Increase the EBITDA margin from 9% to 15% by the end of year 3. Top grade the sales organizations by the end of year 1. For each one of the people that get to a certain point in the process, we're going to rate them based on how we think they can do for each one of these outcomes, and then the competencies. So these are some of the competencies you might have. Hiring A players, innovative, analytical, they have experience in B2B sales, they follow through on commitments. Here, because we only have a little bit of space, we've only got 5 items. But you might have as many as 20 competencies in here. So don't cut that competencies list short. List everything that you think they need to have. And then as you're going through and grading people, actually put in what the rating is, A through F, for the US system, A, B, C, D, F, and then notes on what they're doing well, what they're doing poorly. This can give you a side-by-side view of all your major candidates and how they're going to do in these different areas. It can make amazing difference when you're actually lining people up, especially if you have multiple people that really are excellent and would be great for the job. If you want to see the full template, just click on this link right. It's an Excel document, so it's easy for you to click through and use it, copy it, etc. All right. The scorecard is your compass. Use it to stay on track during the hiring process. And like I said, compare people side by side. Now we're going to look at sourcing people. This is how to identify and attract the top talent, how to screen resumes and applications, how to conduct effective phone screens, and then we're going to look at strategies for sourcing candidates as well. Referrals, networks, advertising, and direct approaches. All right, so when you're sourcing, referrals from your professional and personal networks are some of the top areas. However, it should not be your only area. This is where I see a lot of people failing, is they try to get referrals from their personal networks, thinking those are going to be the best, and often they are, but don't think your personal network is big enough to source all the right jobs, especially as your business is growing. So for referrals from your professional and personal networks, there's a process to it as well. Create a list of the top 10 talented people you know. Commit to speaking with at least one person per week for 10 weeks. So you, just like any other project, you need to set some goals. You need to say that you're going to do it, and then you need to actually dedicate time to doing it. What happens a lot of times is the time goes by, people haven't looked at people, they just kind of pick what's in front of them. So you have to make sure that you're actually doing this. And then when you're doing this, you're going to ask them to recommend their most talented friends. These, a lot of times, maybe you've got some talented people in your network that might be a good fit for this job, but really what you're going to do is you're going to find your top people you know and ask them for referrals. And then continuously build the list and maintain weekly conversations. On top of that, maybe it's not just you doing it, maybe it's also other people in your company. So you got referrals from your employees. Sometimes this is just what it says here. Add sourcing as an outcome for every scorecard on the team. Encourage employees to ask their networks for talent recommendations and offer a referral bonus as an incentive. So that referral bonus as an incentive can be for referring the talented person that then leads to the hire, or it could be directly for a hire. Don't forget about getting those top talented people who would know people to hire and could give you top recommendations. And then deputize friends of the firm. Consider offering a referral bounty to select friends from the firm. This can be a gift certificate or cash. So usually this is more just like, I'm looking for somebody, and you're going to tell them who you're looking for. It's not really the talented person. But the referrals from the business, for the employees, that's that talented person and or referrals. All right. Next, you can hire recruiters. So use the method described in the book for this. It's a bit more complicated. Create a scorecard for your recruiting needs, hold recruiters accountable, and ensure recruiters understand your business and culture. Understanding businesses and culture is one of the harder pieces. You really have to do a write-up for them to explain everything you're looking for. Good recruiters will often ask you these questions anyway, but some of them don't. And so it's really important that you make sure that they know how to do all of this. And I recommend just reading the book to go through this section. Hiring researchers. Now you can recruit researchers for contract hiring as well. This is just people that you can hire, either outsource people or sometimes in-house people as well, that are just going to go search. And the reason you're going to get this is that a lot of times the best people are already hired. So it's more of a headhunting process than it is necessarily a finding people process. And this might be the same, this would be the same exact process here as kind of using recruiters, but instead of hiring a recruiter, you could, for example, hire somebody out of the Philippines who has a little bit of experience doing this kind of thing, but they have a lot of time and their time is not very expensive. And you can just pay them to go and search and search and search and search and put together a big long list for you. And then even sometimes call them, talk to them, etc., or have people on your team do that. It can be a lot cheaper than using those recruiters because in a lot of cases, recruiters will charge as much as 30% of the first year salary, sometimes more than that, for the hire. Whereas hiring just a bunch of researchers, how many researchers out of the Philippines could you hire for $30,000 on a $100,000 hire? A ton. You could produce thousands and thousands of people, sort them, rank them, search, sort, rank, etc., with that much money, with an army of researchers. And then you can also use sourcing systems, things like Indeed, or Indeed. I'm not a big fan. I think that you waste a lot of money on that, or a lot of time on that. But there's other really good systems. A lot of the systems that I use, a lot of times the systems that I use are going to be Upwork, Dynamite Jobs, We Work Remotely, a few other systems like that. But keeping in mind, I'm almost always hiring digital workers that work remotely. So those are great tools for that. Doesn't apply for everything, but it's a good place to start and a good thing to think about when you're looking for for finding people. All right. And then, as I said before, don't assume that your network is diverse enough to attract the best talent. It's not. If you're looking for the best of the best of the best and your company is growing, let's say at best, 5,000 people, and you can get 5,000 more people out of that. That's 10,000, maybe 15,000 people, something like that, somewhere in that range. That maybe you could hit with some of your posts, or you could reach out to. More than likely, that's not going to be the top talent. Like that, let me think about it. If you've reached that many people, fantastic. But how many more people are there that you haven't reached? So just keep in mind, there's probably a lot more people that you need to reach, and you should look at them through these other methods as well. Now it's time to start selecting people. And this is where we go through a series of interviews. So in order to conduct effective interviews, we're going to talk about how to ask behavioral-based interview questions, how to evaluate candidates, and how to avoid common interviewing mistakes. And there are a lot of common interviewing mistakes. We're going to look at 4 main interviews: the screening interview, the who interview, the focused interview, and the reference interview. The screening interview is a real quick interview just to make sure that we've got the right person. The who interview is going to look over their history, their experiences, their failures, their successes, etc. The focused interview is going to be more of the technical skills interview, and the reference interview is probably the most important, is the interviewing of their references. This is what so many people don't do. They don't complete, they don't wrap up, or they skim past it. We're looking for 7 references, not 3, not 2, not 1, not 5, 7. 7 references. That's what we're looking for. And most importantly, you want that candidate to set up the references. This is possibly like the most important thing in the entire book. It's called the TORC, Threat of Reference Check. So as you're going through these screening processes, you need to inform them that, hey, we're going to be calling references, and not just calling them. We want you to set up the references. It's not always possible, which I'll talk about in just a minute, but we want them to set it up, because when they set up the references, they know they're going to have to call these people. And if they don't want to call them, it's probably not somebody you want to talk to. Before we wrap up this section, I think it's very important to point out that the screening interview is for people that get past your qualification process. What I often do is I put together a series of online forms that people have to fill out and give me some information about themselves before I'll even look at doing a screening interview. And these are really, really simple things. I'll ask them to say, like, what is 6 plus 10? I know this sounds so simple, but you'd be amazed how many people can't tell you what 6 plus 10 is. a series of 4 or 5 very simple questions just to make sure that the person is actually thinking. A lot of times I like to actually have them put together a little video intro as well, so we can take a look at our top people from there, a number of other things. But this interview process is that after they've gotten past that initial screening process. Okay, the screening interview. What are your career goals? By the way, it's just these 4 questions. This is a 10-minute interview. What are your career goals? What are you really good at professionally? What are you not good at or not interested in doing professionally? Who are your last 5 bosses? And how will they each rate your performance on a 1 to 10 scale? And when can we talk to them? Or when we talk to them. So that last one, they're going to say, wait, what? Who do you want to talk to? Well, depends on who you're talking to. But basically, you're going to say, like, how would they rate you? And when can we talk to them? We want you to set up that reference. This will screen out so many people right out the gate, because the really poor candidates are not going to want to connect you to their former bosses. And if they know, they're going to give you the info first, and then they're going to then you're going to go ask the bosses. They're going to say, maybe this isn't the right job for me, which is the case. So what do we look out for? For the career goals, allow yourself to hear the candidate's goals and passions. And ideally, they'll share career goals that match your company's needs. Be cautious of clear misalignments and between the candidate's aspirations and the job you're hiring for. So a great example here is that in many cases, in one of the companies I would manage, we would find people that wanted to be entrepreneurs, but we were really looking for people that wanted to stay with the business for a long time. Sometimes these things could be brought into alignment, but a lot of times they couldn't. And so we wanted to make sure that we were, on this first interview, we were screening people for this particular thing. Next, what are you really good at professionally? Push candidates to tell you 8 to 12. I know it sounds like a lot, but 8 to 12 positives, so you can build a complete picture of their professional aptitude and start filling in some of those competencies. It's really important that you actually look at what those competencies are and that you have numbers for them. You can't compare people side by side if you don't fill in those competencies. So when you ask this question, you got to dig in to find these things. Ask them to give you examples that will put their strengths into context. And once again, be able to compare those competencies to, or be able to have competencies to be able to compare for these different candidates. And remember, you're listening for strengths that match the job at hand. Number 3, what are you not good at or not interested in doing professionally? Instead of asking for weaknesses outright, let the candidate answer freely to this, because this gives you great ideas about what they're not that good at, or they just don't like doing, which is a really important piece of doing the real part of the job. Because if you know there's a critical piece they don't want to do as part of the job, that's a major misalignment there. If you receive cookie cutter answers, push the candidates to give you real weaknesses or an area for development. If they can't give you real weaknesses, if they can't tell you what they don't like, they're probably not a good fit for this job. And I'll talk about that again in just a few minutes. All right. Identify at least 5 to 8 areas where the candidate falls short, lacks interest, or doesn't want to operate. Screen out these candidates if they fail to meet these criteria or if they are deal breakers. Who were your last 5 bosses? And how will each of them rate you on a performance of 1 to 10 when we talk to them? Not if we talk to them, but when we talk to them. So use the language when we talk to them instead of if we talk to them to prompt the candidates to be more honest about their performance from the references. What you want to know is, how do you think they're going to say you did when we talk to them? And they're going to, knowing that it's going to be this, that is this threat of reference check. And you're gonna follow it up with them, and what you're looking for is that they tell you the truth on this, and you want to make sure that what the boss tells you and what they tell you actually line up. Ask the candidates to list each boss and offer a rating for each one. So you're gonna say, like, boss 1, how did you do? Boss 2, boss 3, etc. Knowing that you're gonna go check it, and with them knowing it, they're probably gonna give you like, oh, this guy gave me a 7, this guy gave me an 8, this guy definitely gave me a 10. This guy will give me a 4, 3, whatever. You really got to press for details on this stuff. You've got to know enough so that when you go talk to the boss, it's going to line up, or at least what they told you should line up. And you're looking for lots of 8, 9s, and 10s. Consider 7s neutral and 6s below is actually pretty bad. So that said, I think that this is really an important piece. What I've seen is some employees or some potential employees will say like, oh yeah, last 5, 6 jobs are 8, 9, 10, 8, 9, 10, 8, 9, 10, whatever those are. But then before that, I got like a 3 or 4. And what I've seen a couple times is that people don't give themselves enough credit for when they were first getting started. Or maybe they just weren't that good when they were getting started. But if you had somebody that worked 20 years ago and they gave themselves a 5, but that was a job 20 years ago, and then the last 20 years they've got 8, 9s, and 10s, it's usually fine. People change over 20 years. All right, next up, the who interview. What were you hired to do? What accomplishments are you most proud of? What were some of the low points during that job? Who were the people that you worked with specifically? What was your boss's name? How do you spell that? What was it like working with him or her? What will he or she tell me were your biggest strengths and areas for improvement? How would you rate the team you inherited on an ABC scale? What changes did you make? Did you hire anybody? Did you fire anybody? How would you rate the team when you left on an ABC scale? And why did you leave the job? All right, what do we look out for here? What were you hired to do? It's a clear window into the candidate's goals and targets for this specific job. You're trying to discover what their scorecard might have been if they had one. You're trying to discover what their scorecard might have been had they had one. And as you're going through, coach them, kind of walk them through by asking them how they thought their success was measured in the role. At some companies, success is not measured well or not measured at all. And so just because it is at your company, don't assume it was at their former company. And then what accomplishments are you most proud of? Most candidates are going to focus on what really mattered to them during that time, not what was on the resume, although some it lines up pretty well. Ideally, candidates are going to tell you what accomplishments matched the job outcomes that they described. And even better, those accomplishments will match what you have in the scorecard. A players tend to talk about outcomes, not expectations. They tell you what they did and how well it worked and what didn't work. They didn't just tell you what was expected of them by their boss. B and C players, on the other hand, talk about what events happened, who they met, aspects of the job, but not the actual results. What were some of the low points during that job? People can be hesitant to share lows at first, but everybody has low points. So try to reframe the question over and over and over again until the candidate gets the message. What went wrong? What was your biggest mistake? What would you have done differently? What part of the job did you not like? In what ways were your peers stronger than you? And that's a hard one for people to answer, but push them because you really need to know what they're not doing right. Once again, to fill in those competencies and figure out if they can actually do the things that are on your scorecard. Number 4, for that question on who are the people you work with. So this is that threat of reference check question. This involves asking the candidate for the boss's name, spelling it out, and inquiring about their experience with that boss. This question prompts truthfulness because they know that you're going to be calling that reference. How would you rate the team you inherited on an ABC scale for managers? And what changes did you make? How did you fire anyone? Did you hire anybody? How would you rate the team when you left? Once again, this is applicable to managers. This tells you how they improved or did not improve their team. Digging in and finding what they did well and what they did poorly, once again, can help you answer the strengths, weaknesses, and competencies questions. And then, why did you leave the job? If you understand why they left, that can tell you about were they promoted, were they recruited, were they fired, why did these things happen, etc. Vague answers have got to be explored. You've got to dig in on these. If you don't dig in on these are some of the most important questions. You can let really bad candidates slip by. And stories and revelations throughout this can really give you a lot of information about the candidate's true intentions or who they really are and if they're really a good fit for this business or not. Here's some things that you can do to really improve your interviewing process. Number one, interrupt the candidate. At least every 3 or 4 minutes, like interrupt them a little bit. Give them a little push and pull on this. Smile, keep up their enthusiasm, but you want to see how they're dealing with you when you interrupt them. But if it's somebody that's just going to keep talking over you, is this somebody that's going to stop every single time? Is this somebody that's easy to work with or not easy to work with? That interruption can tell you a lot about how this person is to work with. Number two, the 3 Ps. How was your performance against the previous year's performance? How did your performance compare to the plan? How did your performance compare to peers? This gives you a lot of information about how the person did against all of these things. Against previous years tells you, are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Against the plan tells you that somebody made a plan for them in the beginning, probably, hopefully them. How did they do against it? And why if they didn't meet it or they were, far underneath it, why did that happen? And then how are they doing against their peers? Knowing you're going to be calling some of their peers. Number 3, push and pull. People who do really well are pulled. They're pulled up the chain. They're pulled into new jobs. They're recruited to other things. People who do poorly are pushed. They're pushed out. They're pushed out of the business. They're pushed into other roles, etc. So you're looking for people that are pulled. So ask questions about this push and pull. How did you get there? What drove this? Did you get recruited? Were people calling you? What's pulling you? Whereas if you see a lot of push, that's a problem. Number 4, painting the picture. Ask the person to explain things and paint the entire picture for you. Explain the other people. Explain what's happening. And as you're going along, coach the person on explaining things more and more in depth. And that can give you a lot of insight as to what was going on in the business and also how this person thinks. Number 5, stop at the stop signs. If someone's feeling uncomfortable and they're moving around or they're sweating or they're kind of, doing all sorts of things, watch for that. Watch how they're moving around. Something I like to look for is if I think somebody's lying to me. So if they are looking down and to the left, which is hard to tell on a virtual meeting, you got to tell which way is left and which way is right. But down to the left, a lot of times somebody can be lying. Not always, but sometimes. But like I said, sometimes down to the right, down to the left, it's hard to tell. Look for when you think somebody's lying to you. Look for those body language signs. It's really, really important. All right, number 3, the focused interview. The purpose of this one is to talk about competencies, experience selling. The purpose of this one is to talk about the specifics of what this person's job is going to be. That could be competencies, building teams, selling, development, design, product management, project management, whatever it is that person's going to be doing. That's what you're going to be talking about in this particular interview. For these items, you're going to be asking about what are their biggest accomplishments in this part of their career. And what are your insights into the biggest mistakes that they've made and the lessons that they've learned? So what do you need to look out for in this area? So first off, you want to get to know the candidate more. The focused interview is a lot longer, so it gives you a lot more time to ask specific questions and go a little deeper into getting to know this person. It's really important to bring other people into this part of the interview and have them ask specific questions, especially if you need specific skill sets for this particular role. The main thing about this interview is that it's specifically focused on the competencies and outcomes for the scorecard. That's what you're looking at. For every one of these questions, go deeper. Ask questions about how did you do that? What was that like? What was the outcome? The thing is, you really, really want to know what were the outcomes? How did they do? How did they do it? The how is super important because that tells you how they were being successful and what worked and what didn't work, and it gives you a lot more input onto their personality and if they're going to be able to do the same things at your business. And finally, the reference interview. This is the interview where you're going to ask their references, how the person did, what they did, etc. So you're going to ask them, what's here on the page? In what context did you do the work with this person? What were their biggest strengths? What were the person's biggest areas of improvement back then? How would you rate his or her overall performance in the job on a 1 to 10 scale? What about his or her performance causes you to give that rating The person mentioned that she struggled with blah, whatever the thing is on the job. Can you tell me about that? Those are the questions you're going to ask in that reference interview. So what do we need to look out for here? You're testing what you learned from the candidate here. So what do we look out for in these questions? We're essentially just testing to see if what the candidate told us is actually true. And so we're going to be calling their peers, their bosses, potentially some of their subordinates, etc., to see if everything they said was actually the truth and how it lines up with what they said. What we want to know is, like, they told us he gave us a 7. Is that true? Oh, no, I gave him an 8. Okay, well, it's pretty close. They said you would give them a 10. No, I'd give them a 3. Obviously, you got to watch out for that kind of thing. And you've got to contact the right number. Remember, we're looking for 7 references. 7, not 6, not 3, not 2, definitely not 1. We're looking for 7. So that's going to be 3 bosses, two peers, and 2 customers. That's what we're looking for here. So make sure you get all of these. Each one of these is going to have different things to say about the way that they interacted with the person. Most of the time. Sometimes it's the same. All right. Now we have to decide who to hire. The goal of the selecting step for this method is to gather the facts you need to decide if somebody's skill, what they can do, and their will, what they want to do, matches your scorecard. Okay, red flags. This is potentially the most important part of this entire thing. I'm not going to go over every one of these, but I'm going to talk about the ones that really I hit on every single time. First, candidate does not mention past failures. If they don't mention any past failures, there's a problem. They don't want to talk about it. They didn't meet certain expectations, whatever it may be. If there's no failures, they can't think of anything, they're lying, because everybody fails sometimes. Number 2, this is probably the number 1 thing on the list. Candidate speaks poorly of past bosses. Now, if somebody says, oh, I had a great experience here and a great experience here and great experience here, and this one, I had a real hard time working with this person, that's one thing. But I've had a number of candidates over the years say, oh, this boss was terrible, this boss was terrible, all my bosses are terrible. All your bosses almost certainly were not terrible. There's one common denominator in all those jobs, and it's the candidate. And if somebody comes in and all their bosses were terrible, immediately they're off the table. Let's see. When a candidate is more interested in compensation and benefits than the job, this is also a massive red flag. I want somebody who wants to work on doing the thing that they're applying to do. If they want to talk mostly about compensation and benefits, it's not going to be a good fit. I'm usually right off the table. I want them interested in what they're doing. Candidate self-absorbed, I think that's pretty clear. Candidate takes credit for the work of others. So when you're meeting with subordinates or when you're meeting with customers, sometimes with bosses, but usually with subordinates or peers, that's a red flag. If somebody is stealing. And so if somebody's doing that, you don't want them on your team. If you're trying to hire somebody and the manager in a manager role and they have never hired or fired anybody, it's a big problem. Because if they've never hired or fired anyone, they don't know how to do it at your business, and you need them to be able to do that. And it's a job, it's a skill that takes time to learn and time to practice, and they're probably not going to, if they haven't been able to do it before, they haven't done it before, they're probably not going to do it well at your business. If the candidate cannot explain job moves, if they're like, oh yeah, well, I just moved. Yeah, I moved on to the next thing. Okay, why'd you move on? It's a problem. Probably they were pushed out. That push and pull we talked about before, there's your push and pull right there. They were pushed. And then if the candidate tries really hard to look like an expert, this is one that I've seen over and over and over again with sales roles. Somebody comes in and they're looking for kind of a mid-level man. They've been in sales for 20-something years, and they're kind of looking for like a mid-level thing. And they say, oh, I'm great at this, I'm great at this, I'm great at this, I'm great at this, all these things. But yet, if you're great at all of these things, people would be searching for you. They would be looking for you. You would not be interviewing for this position most of the time, not all the time. Now, if you got this person through a headhunter or something like that, maybe. But they would also be talking about everybody else that's trying to find them, or they have multiple other offers on the table, etc. But if they don't, and they're trying real hard to look like an expert, it's probably because they're not. So those are some of the red flags that really get me every single time. All right. And then this is a really important one. Don't hire people who are good at interviewing. Hire people who will be good at doing the job. I've done this so many times where somebody comes in, they give a great interview. I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. But when you line them up for scorecards, you just realize like they're not there. They're not they don't compare against everybody else. And so even though they're a great interviewer, this whole entire system gives you a method of comparing people side by side, and it lets you make determinations based on that. Hire people who are good at doing the job. All right. Now we got to sell the job. Those best people, the people that you really, 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 really want, they need to be sold to. They got lots of options. People are pulling them up to other roles. There's tons of offers going to them. You need to find a way to get them to come to you. So there's the sales aspect of this, and it cannot be forgotten. We're going to talk real quick about how to make a great job offer, how to negotiate salaries and benefits, and how to onboard new hires. That last part of that, number 3, onboarding new hires, is where I see so many people screwing up because they get the great person and then they don't onboard them, and the person is like, this kind of sucks, and they leave. And so you've got to work on onboarding them and getting them into the business as well as these other things. All right. Candidates are more likely to accept an offer when they feel a personal connection with the company and its mission. And this comes back to a lot of the other things that we talk about at Ascendant as far as mission, vision, values, goals, accountability, management, all of those other things. If somebody feels a connection to what the business is doing, sometimes they'll take a pay cut to do it. Sometimes they'll work extra hours to do it. Sometimes they'll do all sorts of things because it's meaningful to them. It's not just about the money and the benefits like we talked about a minute ago. It's about doing the job. The job is meaningful. In fact, somebody called me about this the other day, asking me, should I take this job and this job? One of the jobs was paying $100K. One job was paying $70K in a city that was much more expensive. The $100K job was a fully remote job where he could live where he's been living, where he's got a great setup. He was looking at taking a $30K cut and having a much higher cost of living to do this other job. And that conversation happens over and over and over and over all across the world all the time because people want to do something that's meaningful. All right. Here's the 5 things we got to. Here's the 5 things we've got to do to seal the deal: fit, family, freedom, fortune, and fun. The 5 F's. Once again, straight from the book Who. All right. So we got to identify the 5 F's that matter to each candidate. Different candidates have different things. Sometimes they don't have a family, or a family is not that important to them. Maybe they have a family, but the family is really far away. It's not that important. It can go at the bottom of the list. Maybe the fit in the role is the most important thing. Maybe the fun, the ability that they're going to be able to go to the city that you're in and have a huge amount of fun, or have fun with the team. That's really important to some people. You got to figure out what the things are as you go through your interviews, and then build the pitch to each person the right way. And then you've got to find and execute. It's not just finding, it's executing a plan to address all the 5 F's in waves during your selling. So during sourcing, during the interviews, between offers and acceptance, and between acceptance and the first day, and the first day, and the first 100 days on the job, you've got to be pushing the 5 F's. Okay. And then finally, be persistent. Don't give up until you got that A player. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to over the years. They say, well, I tried to hire for this and it just didn't work out and I'm not doing it anymore. And then they're done and that's it. And yeah, but they still need to fill the role. They're still suffering because they don't have it filled. You got to keep going. You got to be persistent. So what makes a great business, a successful business? 52% of that success is that management talent, which is what this WHO process very often applies to. External factors 11%, execution 20%, strategy 17%. But that execution and strategy, who enacts that? Management talent. All right. So how to get this going on within your company? Make the people a top priority. Follow the process we just went through. Build support among your executive team and peers. Cast a clear vision for the organization. Reinforce it through every communication with the broader team. Something we talk a lot about at Ascendance. Holistically, train your team on best practices. Remove the barriers that impede success. Implement new policies to support the change. Recognize and reward those who use the method to achieve the results. Remove managers who are not on board, and celebrate wins. And investing in the development of top talent can help organizations achieve long-term success. And we see that over and over and over and over again. I appreciate you watching everything. And if you need any additional assistance, you can always reach out to us over here at ascendance.coach. Thanks so much. Have a great day.